and 2 plates of mashed potatoes that are so mashed, you could sip them through a straw. Now, I don't know exactly what all that means, but just trust me here. I'm classy. Now, it was the day after Easter, but I wasn't in the mood for any of those fluffy bunnies or that hard-boiled egg hunting or anything like that. I was still reeling from the traumatic events of a few days earlier. I think you all know what I'm talking about. GQ magazine, Gumshoe Quarterly, had just released their list of the 50 classiest detectives, and I was snubbed once again. I'm doomed to always come in second to that has-been Private Eye Beretta McLeod. I'm telling you, I am way classier than that guy. Anyways, everyone around here is pretty torn up about the whole fiasco. Ever since it happened, I have been hearing wailing in the streets. Yeah, everyone is right there along with me, mourning my loss.
Oh, I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where?
Down in my heart.
Where?
Down in my heart.
I've got the joy, 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 joy down.
Hey, you! Hold on a second. What have you got to be so happy about? Haven't you heard what happened?
Oh, I have. Isn't it wonderful?
Must be a Beretta McLeod fan. Who? Never mind that. Who are you anyways?
Oh, I'm Cleopas.
Well, Mr. Clown Pants, I don't know who you are. But around these parts, we're in mourning. So why aren't you gnashing those teeth?
Well, I was sad, but I'm not anymore because someone reminded me of something very important.
And what would that be?
Well, I'll have to tell you the whole story.
Go ahead, but make it quick. If there's one thing I can't stand, it's people who talk in long, rambling monologues. So what's your story?
Well, yesterday, a friend of mine and I were walking along the road to the village of Emmaus. You know, and we were still really upset about Jesus being crucified on the cross.
That's why everyone was in mourning?
Well, yeah. Isn't that why you were in mourning?
Yeah, me, of course. It had nothing to do with a certain issue with the gumshoe.
Anyway, my friend and I were walking and talking about all the things that have been happening when the stranger shows up and wants to walk along the road with us.
Doesn't anyone take the trolley anymore?
What?
Forget it. You were saying?
Well, the stranger asked us what we were talking about. And I said, well, haven't you heard about all the things that have happened in Jerusalem the past few days? And he said, what things? So, well, we told him about how Jesus was crucified and buried.
Really, Mr. Platypus? How thoughtless of you. This new guy comes into town, thinks to himself, hey, why don't I go and have a nice leisurely stroll down an old country road? He sees you guys and says to himself, hey, why don't I go on over there and say, howdy, neighbor, how do you do? He's perfectly happy, and then, bam, you unload all your grief onto him. Honestly, some people just aren't satisfied until they make everyone else cry about their problem. Take my problem, for instance.
Well, you know, that was the strange part. We did unload all the grief on him, like you said. But what we told him didn't make the stranger cry.
Come again?
Well, I'm saying the stranger didn't seem sad at all.
So the stranger wasn't sad after hearing that story. He must have a really strong heart. Or no tear ducts. Me, on the other hand, I cried throughout the hat. Particularly my hat, because it's really hard to get stains out of this fabric. But I cry when it rains on my off days. I cry when I lose a canasta. When they canceled Magnum PI. I cried like a little girl who just lost her Barbie doll down the garbage disposal. This guy, he didn't even feel bad after hearing the most devastating news that any man could hear. Maybe he knew something that the rest of us didn't. So answer me this, Cleopatra. If he wasn't sad, then what emotion was he? Was he overwhelmed, pensive, persnickety perhaps?
No, to tell you the truth, he was a little impatient with us.
For what?
Well, he said that we were foolish and slow of heart. He said that Jesus had to suffer all these things. That it was part of God's plan from the beginning. And to prove it, he quoted scripture from the Bible.
The Holy One?
Yes, the Holy Bible. Now we were so excited, it was like our hearts were burning inside of us. We had been so sad, but the stranger reminded us to look at the big story. No matter how bad things look, God always has a plan.
So God always has a plan. That does tend to lift the spirits. To think, there are verses in the Bible that predicted things that weren't going to happen for hundreds of years. That's what I call planning in advance. I sure am glad God's the one doing all the planning too, because I tried to plan a surprise birthday party for my secretary Helen once, and I kind of forgot to invite her. So the stranger reminded you that God always has a plan, and that's why you're so happy now?
Yeah, that was one reason.
Well, what's the other?
Well, the stranger. The stranger wasn't a stranger at all. It had been Jesus all along.
The crucified and buried Jesus?
The very same, but he's alive again, don't you see?
That's amazing! A man raised from the dead? That really is a big story. So you were walking with Jesus this whole time and you didn't even know it? You didn't happen to see that radiant glow?
I must have missed it.
Well, I guess that doesn't matter. It's still a great story. Well, Mr. Cleopas, thank you for your time. But before you go, let me ask you one more thing. If God always has a plan, do you think he's got a plan for me?
Well, of course he does.
Well, I guess maybe I shouldn't be so sad about only being the second classicist detective. Maybe there's a reason I never come first. Like, maybe God just wants me to be more humble. Nah, that couldn't be it. I don't think you can get much more humble than me. I mean, I am way more humble than that bread in the cloud. If Gumshoe Quarterly were to issue a list of the 50 most humble detectives, I'd win that one for sure.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Gumshoe Quarterly? Well, it's quite enjoyable. You should really subscribe. Come on, let me tell you about this article I was reading yesterday about shoe print samples. Stimulating stuff.